My name is Foteini and I'm an executive member of BEAT.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shauna Seligman, and I'm also an executive member of BEAT. We're honored tonight to have Amy Lin, principal and co-founder of Suulin Architects, host tonight's BEAT Talk.
BEAT is continuing to work in collaboration with local architects to provide the platform for promoting equality within the profession through networking and leadership opportunities. BEAT Talks are a series of discussions held at the offices of architects across the city, where hosts will share learned experience. Our next event will be in May with the Architecture Studio. You may sign up for our mailing list on the BEAT website to receive notifications for more details on upcoming virtual events.
This talk is being recorded and will be posted to the BEAT website for anyone that could not attend. All of the participants' microphones were muted upon entry, but you'll be able to submit any questions you have at any point during the presentation in the Q&A section at the bottom center of the screen. We will compile the questions for the Q&A session after Amy's talk. The chat box just to the right of the Q&A can be used for any immediate troubleshooting assistance.
This webinar qualifies for one OAA Connect hour. However, you must stay for the whole duration of the event to receive the certificate.
And now we'd like to introduce Betsy Williamson, who is on the BEAT Advisory Committee and a principal of Williamson Williamson, to say a few words about this evening's host, Amy Lin.
Thank you, Shauna and Foteini. It is such a pleasure to introduce Amy. Amy Lin is an accomplished architect who has had a career that is familiar to me in a way that you probably wouldn't guess. We've been orbiting each other since high school. So even though we were from different parts of the country, we were in the same class in high school. And then a number of years later, we were in the same master's program in graduate school, after which Amy began working in New York, emerging as the project architect with Polshik Partnership of the Standard Hotel on the High Line, which is a great project and a great site. So the next time you're in New York, you have to go visit. Upon moving to Toronto, she and her partner, James Chevelle, began working at Sutcliffe Architects the year after I left. So I was there for 8 years, and she and James were there for the 6 years following, during which they were project architects for the residence for the Sisters of St. Joseph on O'Connor Drive in Toronto, which is a fabulous project that ended up winning Sutcliffe Architects a Governor General's Award. So congratulations on that work. At that point, they created Suulin and found their own voice, starting small and quickly emerging as a design-focused office, winning Best Emerging Practice from the OAA in 2018. Some of you may be familiar with one piece of their practice from the recent article that Alex Bezigovic wrote in the Globe and Mail titled "Yes in My Backyard," which outlines the fervor around their sensible adaptive reuse proposal in Harvard Village, amongst many other projects and neighborhoods in the city. And if you haven't read the article, I highly recommend it. With such a rich career to date, Amy has lots to share, and we are lucky to be hearing a piece of it tonight. So, Amy, thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to your talk.
Thank you. Thank you to BEAT for having me, and to Betsy for being the ever positive peer who gives me a nudge every once in a while and reminds me that there's a world out there. Betsy was already campaigning for women in architecture in our graduate school days at the GSD, so it is no surprise that she continues to fill that leadership role so well. It's been an easy year to hide away. Public speaking is what I usually leave to my partner, James, who everyone knows is the one to talk to. But seeing as he is a white male Canadian, I guess he doesn't really fit the bill here. I want to take a moment to reflect on the past year of the pandemic. I think I can speak for everyone and say that it has been a year with no other parallel. Not only did many of us experience personal losses in some way, but incidentally, we also came too close to losing democracy in the United States. We lost some great voices, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, John Lewis, And with the loss of democracy comes the loss of many other privileges and hard-earned progress. I've been helping my son study Black history this past month, and it is unthinkable that after so many amazing people have fought so hard with their lives over the past century, we might have quite seriously lost so much of that progress that has been painstakingly made. But even now, it is evident that none of us can be complacent. There is still so much work to be done in the pursuit for equality for all people, regardless of race or gender, and regardless of the where and what. We have now seen how fragile our democracies can be, how easily they can tilt towards prejudice and instigate conflict. It is very clear that without the voices of the people protesting, whether on the streets or by writing letters, social media, or by their actions, there is no guarantee on our democracy or freedom. This new year has also brought some signs of hope, like the new spring growth of a perennial that's just been battered over a long winter, slowly pushing out fresh shoots. The US finally has a woman vice president, and people's voices were heard in Georgia and all over the world. They were heard on the streets for George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, for Polish women, and most recently in the form of Stop Asian Hate protests that have been taking place across the world, including here in Toronto. As an architect, I see much of the world through the lens of architecture. Architecture is a powerful tool, and architects, including myself, are prone to believing that architecture in and of itself can solve the world's problems. Good architecture certainly can do wonders, but it is only truly effective when paired with the right social, political, and economic policies. At its best, it's a symbol of our collectivity as humans. Organizations like BEAT are a platform for showing that the culture of architecture should always be one of equal rights. So I want to thank BEAT for taking up these causes within the field of architecture here in Toronto, and to reminding me that it is important to speak out for these causes. I want to acknowledge the land on which we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. I also want to acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Further, on the topic of colonialism and imperialism, I'm going to go out on a little bit of a limb here. Another positive lining to this year was that the small country of Taiwan must have been in the news more times than I can ever recall in 1 year. So hopefully all of you know a little more about this little island country that could and can. As someone who identifies ethnically as Taiwanese, I want to urge all of you to take a more critical view of China and its imperialist behavior. For too long, the Western world has put a blind eye to the human rights abuses there in the name of commerce. Severe human rights violations, including genocide against its own people, against Tibetans, Uyghurs, against Hong Kong, artists such as Ai Weiwei, many human rights activists such as Nobel Peace Prize laureate Liu Xiaobo. Taiwan is a country of peace-loving, friendly people who have been self-governing since the end of World War II and during many other periods of history. Its democracy was born with the lifting of martial law in 1987 by Li Danghui, another great person we lost in 2020. His nickname was Mr. Democracy, and he oversaw Taiwan's transition to a full-blown democracy with the first open presidential election in 1996. Taiwan has been a leader in democratic governance in Asia, also being the first Asian country to recognize same-sex marriage in 2019. Yet no Western country will recognize Taiwan. So I entreat all of you not to brush these facts aside and to examine our everyday actions which do affect the markets that the destiny of too many people's lives and worlds seem tied to. Perhaps if we all act with conscience, we can untie these bonds. I'm doing my best not to talk about my work. So how did I get here, and what does our practice mean? I'm indebted to many people along the way, both during my education and in practice. I had 3 formative teachers at MIT, where it all began. MIT stands for Made in Taiwan, for those of you who don't know. A New Zealander, a Hungarian, and a Chilean. At a time when the school down the street was taken with the unrelenting boxes of Bauhaus modernism, nothing wrong with that, these 3 professors, along with others, steeped to MIT in an architecture based in a humanism, informed by the presence of Albert Aalto, who taught at MIT while designing the Baker House dormitory there. Carlos Scarpa, Hans Scharoun, and Hermann Hertzberger were other key influences. The 3 were dedicated teachers, more so than practitioners. To figure out how to advance my slide here. This is where I am right now. And Fernando D'Amico taught me about materiality and detail and how to see 3-dimensionally. Imre Halash taught me the importance of context in the urban environment and human scale within that. Imre used to tell me stories about Aalto sitting in the Baker House dorm room mock-up for hours, testing the space. Morris Smith, a very feisty New Zealander, gave me the construct and tools with which to organize and understand space. While the 3 could not be more different from each other, their teachings were perfectly meshed and permanently internalized in my architecture brain. Regardless of which aspect or scale, they were all united in an ideal of a built form that was inseparable from the human form. And the idea that the built form didn't just include the building, but its extension out into the landscape or whatever fabric that was the site. Morris instilled in me the idea that the building was really part of the landscape, and this is how he fervently viewed architecture. For him, the light was material to be formed and to have continuity. The light and the ground were 2 active participants engaged with each other. Morris was one of the people we lost last year, and one of several who I was close to. He passed away in December, so I thought it was fitting to dedicate this talk to him. I understand that normally the beat talk would happen in person at our office, around a table, more in conversation. And this is very much how Morris liked to teach, and also what I would prefer. Morris and Fernando and Imre were immigrants and outsiders in many ways. They definitely did not represent the mainstream in architectural education, either then or now. And I think as a whole, they were underappreciated. They were dedicated to the teaching of architecture and a big part of who I am here today. Morris is pictured here with the Black Men's working on the first house he built for them. This is an image of Morris's house. To most people, this might seem like a crazy collection of items lovingly extracted from the scrapyard, which it most certainly was. But it was really a laboratory and a vehicle with which he used to teach his principles of open form and built landscape. In the earlier days of his studio, students would pilgrimage up to Harvard, where he lived, and hit some nails. He made beautiful abstract collages, which were his studies in light and form. This is a picture of the last time I saw him in 2019. From this education, my perspective in architecture was established and reinforced by other like-minded people. Bridget Shem, at the early beginnings of her practice with Howard Sutcliffe, had been invited to speak at MIT. I remember this day well. It was an informal talk under the dome of the main building at MIT, on the top floor where there used to be architecture studios. The space was full and everyone was impressed and satisfied with hearing from an architect who actually understood built form as more than just a building and who paid equal attention to the landscape. I know that Bridget knows her perennials. From this time, I followed Bridget and Howard's work and was later privileged to work for them many years later. The other side of the coin of architecture is the practice. Prior to coming to Toronto, I spent varying amounts of time at a number of firms, including working for a year in Germany. After graduating with my master in architecture from Harvard, I worked at some small offices before settling in at Polshek Partnership Architects for 8 years, where I became a design associate. There, I learned what it means to practice and put a building together. Prior to that, I was wary of working at a larger office, but the office culture at Polshek, which is now Eniad Architects, could not have been more cultivating and communal. It was a family of thoroughly engaged professionals from whom I learned so much, especially from my mentor there, Kevin McClurkin. To this day, I continue to reach out to them for friendship and professional advice. Kevin and others taught me how to put a building together, make a drawing that a contractor can actually use, and be a team player. The one thing that he was never able to teach me was how to put my pencil down, but he did try. The first project I worked on there was the Clinton Presidential Center, which I was able to work on through construction to the day of its opening, just hours after George Bush won his second term. The running joke was that it was no mistake that the team largely consisted of women, but what a great team it was. I worked with many talented and caring architects there, and I'm very grateful for my time there. In a year of shocking losses, another great architect and colleague from those days, Craig McElhenney, also passed away in 2020, just a few days before Norris Smith. Unfortunately, way before his time, at the age of 51. Craig exemplified the best of Eniad. He was a total architect, collaborative, thorough, hardworking. He left no details behind. But more importantly, he was also the total human, kind, passionate, caring, and completely selfless. I had the privilege of working with him as project designer on the first stages of the Weill Cornell Research Center, pictured here in the center. In remembering him, I would like to continue his spirit in my practice. I met James, my partner, in New York City while he was working for Todd Williams and Billy Chen. I agreed to move here on the condition that I would work for Bridget and Howard. Fortunately, it worked out. I was hired as the project architect to work on Sisters of St. Joseph home. During its construction, I got pregnant, and James came on board to run it together and keep it going while I was on maternity leave. It was an amazing opportunity to work on the scale project with Bridget and Howard, and we are grateful for their continued mentorship, friendship, and support today. They taught us never to give up, and they continue to inspire us with their unparalleled work and attention to detail. We also developed a great relationship with the Sisters of St. Joseph and continue to assist them today as the needs of the sisters change. We formed Suulin Architects after the completion of this project in 2016. Moku in Japanese, or mu in Chinese, is the character for tree. And in Chinese, 2 trees make a woods and 3 trees make a forest. For us, this elemental character is not only found in our names, but also provides a starting point for our work, representing simply our commitment to building an architecture that is connected to nature. The layering reflected in the architecture of a forest is also what we strive to achieve in our work. To weave an understanding of scale and detail with a constant awareness of the natural in order to create a timeless sense of place. We believe that enhancing and connecting our spaces to nature attunes people to their environments and deepens their self-awareness as well as their connection to place. We believe this is healthy and enriching. Over the past 6 years, we've worked toward integrating nature within our work. Our work consists of the design of buildings and the landscape that surrounds them. Alongside our work, we continue to research and draw inspiration from the role of landscape in Japanese architecture, both traditional and current. We are drawn to the layers of space created while still defining place. The inside room and the outside room are equals and reciprocal. Details accompany transitions and gradations. Roofs extend. Steps are places for both movement and repose. Plants are celebrated but expected. They create intimacy and peacefulness. Rocks, wood boards, soffits, screens create scale and texture. The threshold is never just a door. Even in a more public building, the landscape beyond is always present, drawing your eyes through. The ground is never flat, and the sky is always there. If you have had the fortune to be in some of these places, you will find that despite their exquisite quality, these spaces feel entirely natural. They are still intimate and informal, unadorned and honest, despite their detail and complexity. This quiet beauty and balance between the formal and the informal is something we strive for in many of our projects. Different programs and purposes require different levels of intensity, of course. So in a more public or urban environment, places of transition between inside and outside, enhanced with a sense of nature and natural openness, can also cultivate engagement and bring the dimension of humanism into focus. This was, I'm gonna finally start talking about a few projects. This was one of our first projects, which started out as an interior renovation of a small heritage house. The scope of the project quickly expanded in our conversations with the owner to encompass the entirety of the property from one end to the other. The property was part of a row of heritage cottages, the fronts of which needed to be preserved. The house is located next to a cemetery in Cabbagetown, down a back lane. The lot is unusually deep. You can see here the existing condition terminating in the shed, the grand shed, instead of connecting visually to the cemetery. The spaces in the original house were oppressive and cut off on the outside, both visually and experientially. The house is tucked in at the end of a laneway that provides a rare decompression coming from the busy streets of Bloor and Parliament. We wanted the front yard to become an outdoor room that would act as a threshold to the house, a place to stop and smell the flowers, and to have a seat. Once entering the house, the owner would leave the city behind and be in his retreat. This is a site plan where the house is just a part of the larger landscape. At the back of the house, we created a small addition that juts out into the garden and paving. And the paving, light, and plants continue past to permeate into the depths of the original mass of the house. In section, we've defined a series of places instead of just paths that negotiate the change in elevation from the house to the cemetery. The shed is incorporated lower into the section so that it does not rise above the datum of the fence. A small intimate space is found at the level of the cemetery where one can observe the passing coyotes and rabbits passing to and from the nearby ravine. A few study sketches looking at the reciprocity between garden and house. Just inside the front door, the space already extends through to the very back of the garden, framed by the stair. The small addition of the living room is just enough to open up the ceiling to now really transform the living space to become part of the garden. We chose elemental materials of brick, unadorned steel, and the burnt wood to create a primal sense of place and belonging connected to the garden that is its extension. Above, the bedroom also receives layers of light and looks out over the addition to the cemetery. From outside to in. This was the first garden where we selected and installed all of the plants, and it is something we've continued to do for all of our projects since this. Changing seasons. I won't spend a lot of time on this project, but this was our first commercial building. The project consisted of the addition and renovation of an existing warehouse building. The existing building was built in 3 phases over 40 years, and you can see that the 3 sections had little formal or aesthetic continuity. The west 2/3 of the building was stripped down to the existing structure, and the east 1/3 was demolished to make way for a new 2-story addition. Our son learned at an early age to keep himself busy during our site visits and many project meetings. This was our first opportunity to work at a more public scale, and we looked to create, with some simple gestures, spaces for social engagement. There are 8 tenant spaces, which we could have chosen to access separately from the exterior, but we instead convinced the owner to create a shared atrium space with a continued clerestory to give the sense of exterior space filling the interior of the building. A similar atrium and double height space was made for the client's own headquarters space, which occupied the 2-story addition at the back. There is a communal space on the 2nd floor mezzanine, which also extends to a wood-decked terrace on the roof used for both recreation and gathering. Here you can see the section with the clerestory and double height space. To break the mold of the typical office building developments we observed in the area, we chose again a set of natural and simple materials. Precast concrete walls were used to define the base of the building, as well as the landscape walls outside the building, which define ramps, stairs, and planters leading into the different entrances. Zinc was used for cladding and roofing, and wood was used as cap extensions on the glazing system and exposed, as well as exposed structural fir decking. The property has some beautiful pine trees, and in combination with clerestories and the views outward, the wood elements are a modest means with which to tie the building to its surroundings. They are detailed in such a way that they become the primary defining element, an upright wood screen visually connecting to the wood slat roof that floats overhead. The glazing is detailed in a way to highlight the wood screen as much as possible. Here is the shared atrium space, which now has the intended seating areas and planting for the tenants. I just haven't had time to photograph it. And here you can see how the ceiling of structural fir decking extends and connects to the foliage beyond. The communal space extending onto the roof. We have been fortunate to work with a single developer on 2 projects along the DuPont corridor. We share the developer's passion for striving to build community in their projects. The DuPont corridor is in the process of being developed into a more vibrant urban street, reinforced by a series of green-lined park spaces and bicycle and pedestrian paths. I will just talk about 888 briefly. We are currently working on a live-work mixed-use project at the corner of DuPont and Ossington. Everyone knows this green building in some way or another, and its life, housing artists. It was determined that this building was no longer structurally sustainable, and despite many people's affection for the building has long presented an extremely hazardous corner condition for bicyclists and cars alike, with no visibility due to its proximity to the corner and its lack of transparency. Furthermore, the building is a very closed building, both in its relationship to the public realm as well as within the building. The project is under zoning review with the city and has been going through many iterations. The project began prior to the pandemic as an ambitious residential and mixed-use project. Due to the pandemic, the past year has led to a rethink about the program and has been now reconceived as a live-work rental building. This has presented an exciting opportunity to revisit the definition of live work and what the life of a live work building could be post-pandemic. This is a diagram of the relationships we have been exploring between future live work tenants and the public. We see their relationship as necessary and reciprocal, and something we hope to exploit as part of the architecture of the building. We do always look for ways to extend the public realm into the building by making the edges of the building more permeable. By cultivating positive interactions within the building, we hope to build and strengthen community, both within the building and around. As one of the aspects of natural spaces, we wanted to develop an art path within the building, which would connect different social spaces or outdoor spaces throughout the building that could be used alternately as either casual social spaces or a rotating art gallery featuring work by tenants, for example. The circulation was a combination of corridors and egress stairs, but connecting them through the means of landscape and amenity spaces to encourage people to walk instead of using the elevator, thus promoting healthier living. This was a program diagram of the activity through the building and really trying to engage section vertically through various extensions to outside garden spaces at the different levels. And this is an earlier view of the project with the tower on a podium that was conceived with landscape as its roof. Even though the original building was actually brick and not green metal cladding, the green is the endearing characteristic that seems to have stuck. We used different hues of lightweight precast concrete panels to break down the scale of the building and create openings in between for individual outdoor spaces. We also looked at connections to workshop spaces below that would engage the public sectionally with the lower level, as well as bring light in. From above, you can see the different levels of ground that were introduced throughout the building in the form of gardens and outdoor rooms corresponding to different programming at each location. At the street level, space has been carved out to promote social engagement and activity around entrances and to open up views around the building for better visibility, especially at the corner. The building is still undergoing some changes in our discussions with the city as well as the community. In 2017, we began a relationship and friendship with the Detox Market CEO and his team, which has grown into a collaboration on 4 separate shops, 2 in Toronto, 1 in New York, and 1 in LA. The Detox Market is the leading green beauty retailer in North America, based in LA. It has been a great opportunity to explore the various aspects of retail design and how we could create a new image for the brand without losing its original homegrown appeal, and how we could continue to tailor that for different locations. I'm just going to talk about our last two shops, which are the flagship shops for both New York City and Toronto, located on Spadina. These two shops represented an opportunity to really expand upon the formal and material qualities that had been successful in the first shop at Union Station. From the first shops we knew that we would rely on certain elements such as wood to reflect the purity of the natural ingredients. We'd spent a lot of time considering different species, but finally arrived at a white ash, which provided a bright and clean backdrop to showcase the products. We also knew we would incorporate stone, as the client very much liked the raw beauty of this material, and it provided a good counterpoint to the ash. But each location is very different, and we wanted to also respond to the particulars of each place. For New York City, we were really inspired by the client's vision for this flagship shop. He explained to us that he saw this as a center for green beauty and a place for community. All of these aspects resonate with the qualities that we try to achieve in all of our projects. The footprint of the building was very narrow. It's also very narrow, not unlike the original space in the Union Station shop, but it was on 3 levels. The first floor would house the main shop. The second floor is for events and workshops, as well as for residencies, for facials or makeup sessions within an intimate apartment setting. And the rooftop features additional plants and trees, which we selected and implemented. People can breathe deeply and lounge in this lush natural setting with spectacular views of the city. We wanted to make a place where the source of some of these botanical ingredients could be featured and customers could see and experience some of these plants. Plants like jasmine, lavender, and ylang ylang are mixed in with hardier plants to create an authentic environment that really speaks to the carefully curated products. So in this shop, the design of the planters are fully integrated into the cabinetry for the shop. To integrate the plants further and put emphasis on the organic, we took some cues from the arches of the exterior of the building and shaped the primary walls of shelves with curved lines and openings which serve to interweave the plants and the products. This image is taken a year after the shop was open and the plants have flourished. We have learned that plants have helped create a different sense of immersion and calm that is really positive in any type of space. But of course, here it really reinforces the passionate mission of the shop. The organically shaped islands, which serve to display most of the makeup products, retain the formal language that we have developed in the 2 earlier shops and is part of the unique identity that we have made for the detox market. One of the most important aspects of the detox market shops for the client is that the products are accessible and inviting. It wants people to feel welcome and invited to linger over products. We used the form of the island to create spaces for people within a very narrow space to be able to stop and take their time studying products, browsing as they wish. Different levels within the island set products apart. Here, the feature sink was designed as part of the feature wall. This is the second floor workshop area. And the rooftop, which features some of the plants used in the products, such as lavender, hibiscus, sage, and echinacea. The Spadina shop was housed in an entirely different kind of building, a subterranean space in a historic warehouse building on Spadina, obviously on Spadina. Much of the original elements of the space are featured and left exposed, retaining some of the industrial qualities of the space while creating an oasis from the bustle of downtown Toronto. This is the shop before all the plants have been incorporated. We use stainless steel throughout to complement the industrial nature of the space and to shape the feature sink shown here. The ash wood is still the primary material, which softens the harder materials. These are some makeup and treatment spaces, and this is the feature sink. In a field where you don't usually get to pick your project, especially at this stage, my love for all things Taiwanese and for food in general, and any combination of these two, led me to a very friendly relationship with the owners of the Taiwanese grocery in Markham, a well-respected shop in 1995 run by a mother and her two daughters. The company is the leading importer of Taiwanese foods in Canada and exclusively sells Taiwanese products. The daughters of the company decided to open a new shop, which would be expanded to include prepared foods, and the hope is to elevate their brand and broaden their influence. The new shop is called Meili Market. It's situated in North York, and it can be said this has definitely been a passion project of mine. As you now know, I will take any opportunity to shamelessly increase exposure and awareness of Taiwan. This is a funny little description, but very telling of kind of the humor of Taiwanese people and their sort of limbo relationship to the world. And I just want to point out here that a lot of people think that the island looks like a sweet potato. Taiwan has the largest number and density of tall mountains in the world. There are almost 300 peaks exceeding 3,000 meters. Mount Yusan, or Jade, is the highest peak in Northeast Asia. The landscape and flora is lush and green. The produce is unparalleled. The Taiwanese love food and are known to have some of the best food in the world. Allow me to tease you with just a handful of dishes I've sampled during my travels there. Like most of our retail projects, the site consisted only of a clearly defined interior space. It was located within a nondescript parking building, and there's nothing we could do beyond the box of the rented space. I normally don't take the literal shape of something and turn it into a design feature, but in this case, Taiwan has very distinctive shape, as I mentioned, and is very fondly referred to as a sweet potato. And since sweet potato is also a popular snack in Taiwan. The kitchen and its surroundings take the shape of the island and floats at the center of the space, much like the island itself. The kitchen is surrounded with a band of areas for service, for ordering hot foods and pastries, for getting a quick bite. We wanted to evoke within the shop different experiences of Taiwan. My experiences are largely based in the city of Taipei. You may be meandering between stalls in a farmer's market or night market, or you may find yourself surrounded by greenery. When you are in Taipei, even when you are in between tall buildings, the humidity and greenery of the surrounding mountains is always there. At the end of street corridors, beyond the tips of buildings, trees and stray orchids line most streets and paths. When you enter the shop, you arrive at the open marketplace with flexible carts on wheels that can be used in multiple ways, and an array of bamboo baskets hanging over. We worked with Taiwanese bamboo artist Chang Feng to weave baskets using traditional methods and reminiscent of the night markets with simple bulbs for lighting. A lot of the forms in the shop take inspiration from the tropical fruits of Taiwan, including these baskets, which resemble the shells of a pineapple, now dubbed, I don't know if you guys noticed my pineapple, but it's from Taiwan, now dubbed #freedom pineapple. The market was designed around a large fruit tree, and the millwork on wheels serves as both places to sit and feature display. We seem to have a lot of clients who like green and greenery, but luckily it also is consistent with the mutually felt aim to highlight Taiwan and its unique attributes as much as possible. On the east wall to the right, we have colored wood slats that continue as tile into the kitchen that are suggestive of the mountainous landscape and the natural materials reflective of Taiwan's environment. You see also the southern tip of Taiwan jutting out over an informal seating space, which unfortunately due to the pandemic has not been used yet. On the west wall, the cashier is pictured here with a wall of planters for herbs behind. The angled gables, shelves, and planters are consistent with the mountain theme on the opposite wall. The figurative market stalls continue deeper into the space alongside the west coast of the island, where shoppers can explore the different offerings in each section. The different heights of the peninsula shelves are suggestive of Taiwan's landscape, while each stall is organized around a planter of greenery. It's become a customary part of every project to have a planting party, and we are also often filling in the gaps on other pieces of construction. Since flying in the bamboo artist from Taiwan would have not been possible, we also hung those pieces ourselves and installed the lighting, among other things. This is the market stall for handmade soaps centered around a feature hand washing sink island that we call Turtle Island, after an island in Taiwan. The stone fabricators actually first called it this. They're Chinese, and we found this stone at one of our suppliers' warehouse that had been sitting there for 25 years. Both the client I knew and I knew it was the right one. The depth and subtle mix of olives and brown really brought home to me the nostalgia of old tea shops in Taiwan that you might discover off a small lane street. We also incorporated terracotta tiles, which run ubiquitous around Taiwan as paving and roofing. Here is our knife display, featuring knives made out of artillery shells shot off the coast of China to the nearby Kinmen Island on Taiwan's north coast. The Taiwanese have a knack for putting spin and humor on anything, even as dire as bullets. We can see beyond here an extension that can serve as a tea shop located at the back of the shop. Right now, there are no stools at the end of the table, but if you've ever been to Taiwan, you will find that there are often special treats to find if you walk back far enough into a food shop. You may find yourself at a tea table with a few marinated plums to accompany some rice crackers or possibly a bowl of noodles. You never know. Pictured here is the feature of soy sauce and vinegars. There are still many pieces of the store that we will be filling in time, but we hope that the shop will transport the visitors to Taiwan for a brief moment. Finally, I will end by showing you a preview of a house which is nearly complete. Like our first little cottage in Cabbagetown, it began as a limited renovation. But after a few studies, the work quickly evolved into a project where we have been fortunate to have the opportunity to consider every aspect and detail of the property, from the sidewalk to the very back fence. It has been a very special, as well as all-consuming project for someone who is as much a client as he and his family are collaborators. Because the client has had a similar vision and commitment to the process, we have been able to realize a higher level of immersion than most of our projects. The original house had a distinctive rounded porch that we were originally going to retain, but due to the unusual placement of the adjacent houses relative to this one, we had to add both to the front and the back in order to remain as of right while meeting the needs of an active family of 5. The client wanted at all costs to retain the original building, so we did everything we could to work with the existing structure and to weave and stitch the new into the old. This is the rear of the house. The landscape is a series of grounds that transition from the street through and around the house to the pool and its surrounding gardens. The client wanted the front of the house to be both welcoming to visitors, but still function as a family space for gathering. We defined layers of landscape, both horizontally in the form of stepped planters that were really different grounds, and vertically through soft layers of perennial planting that will be growing in. Together, they transition the street to the front door, creating varied places of engagement, whether it be conversation by the steps or a view to the street from within the original porch. The new front porch is no longer just a formal entry, but a place to enjoy coffee in the morning. We planted perennials in the fall, and the first helleborus blooms are now awakening. Copper was used to complement the brick, all of which was restored. A darker trim was chosen for quieter overall presence and more minimal detailing than the original house. These layers, along with the cantilevered addition at the back, create depth through the property and frame borrowed landscape. The steps are getting paved this week. Very exciting. At the rear of the house, the base and foundation of the house was clad in beautiful glazed bricks. The 4-foot required pool enclosure was carefully considered and designed to allow the spaces to flow instead of separate. Eventually, these barriers will be softened by the growth of various planting. The relatively tall elevation of the ground floor was also designed to have minimal obstructions. There are outdoor extensions, even if they are not accessible, that are associated with every level of the house, such as these steps to the lower level that will bring light into the house and also be a place to sit or to house a piece of sculpture among the ferns and mosses that have been planted there. The exterior stone is used to transition to the inside at both the front and the back of the house, and the wood flooring picks up this geometry. The clients want, above all, for the house to be a retreat from their busy daily lives. Edges are rounded and greenery accompanies light, but otherwise the architectural elements are either quiet or natural. Light spills down the central stair, and plants reach up to the sky. The spaces of the house are meant to be a soft embrace and to foster the needs of a family with kids, to inspire and point towards an ecological understanding of the natural world. I want to end by thanking especially my partner, James, our tireless staff, our current staff, and those who have worked with us previously. We especially want to thank our Senior Associate, Valerie Arthur. Without Valerie and her staff, none of this would be possible. I actually want to end on this fun little video, which sort of really describes everything that Valerie is. Valerie's the project architect for this house, and she has single-handedly made this house, including these nets that we designed for the kids' bedrooms. And this is, can you all see this? Let's see. All right, you ready? How many hours was this? This was about 6 hours of work.
On the plan
outside. Thank you again for having me. Thanks also to our many collaborators on the field, and also thank you to Scott Norsworthy, Anton Kisselgoff, and others for their photographs.